All right, you have found yourself at the precipice of the latest episode of the Rocker Dog Podcast, the only show in podcast form talking to musicians about their dogs. My name is Tim Dill. I am your host for the next half an hour while my bestest friend Charlie the Golden Doodle sleeps. And dead ahead is our conversation with guitarist Max Bernstein, who has been a member of Taylor Swift's touring band since 2018 and is currently on her Eras tour that is crisscrossing Europe this summer. And this is his resilient rocker dog.
So this is Audrey. Audrey is a 12-year-old Japanese chin, and we've had Audrey since she was about 4 months old. She is neither a rescue nor from a breeder. Somebody was selling her on a classified ad. She had bought her from a breeder to play with their kid. They wanted it for her kid, and then the kid was a little rough with her, so they were sort of needed to get rid of her. And it was in a brief moment when eBay had something called eBay Classifieds. We just wanted a Japanese chin, and we Googled looking for a Japanese chin Los Angeles, and this thing came up, and we met this lady in a parking lot in Ontario, California, and she had this little creature who had a different name. At the time, her name was Bella, which we did not particularly care for, and she became Audrey. And,
is that her full name?
She has many names. Her name can be Audrey Marie Bernstein. It can be Audrey P. Puffenhausen, is one that we like to call her frequently. We have notions that she, used to be royalty because the Japanese chins were the emperor's dogs, and now she has to live with lowly us. So we have people with their dogs, and my wife and I are crazy people about Audrey. So we have a whole thing that she is Audrey P. Puffenhausen of the Philadelphia Puffenhausens. You come from old stock.
Now, does she predate Gilda as well?
Yeah. So we had Audrey for about a year and change, I would say. And then, my wife, Rachel is her name. She's had been involved with Japanese chins before she met me. When I met Rachel in 2007, she had a Japanese chin that she had gotten with her ex. And then when they had split up, they had sort of shared custody of. And then that dude moved back east, and Rachel, through the kindness of her heart, let him take the dog, which was very devastating for her. So we determined that we wanted to get a new one, which is how we got Audrey. But she had fostered with a chin rescue before. And then about a year after we got Audrey, this was in early 2012, because we got Audrey in January of 2011. And then this was in February 2012. I remember because I had just gotten back from playing the last Kesha performance I did. It was right when we got Gilda. I'd just gotten back from it. And the day I got back, it was like, okay, there's been the rescue animal control had just busted a hoarder breeder who had something like 40 Japanese chins that they were breeding runts with runts to try to make teacup chins, which is not a thing. And they have, like a lot of flat face breeds, they have breathing problems. And so there was like a transfer that was done. And so for like this one day, we had, they dropped 4 chins off with us, and we found homes for 3 of them. One of Kesha's dancers, Austin, took one and had this chin for about 7 years. Rachel's mom took one. Someone we didn't know took another. And then there was the tiniest and oldest little runt was who became Gilda. And we were planning on just fostering her. And Audrey didn't love having to share us with anyone. So the plan was just we were going to foster her. But then we gave her a name, and once you give a dog a name, and then someone became interested, and the rescue reached out and said, oh, someone is interested in adopting Jazzy. Her name was Jazzy, which I think is short for Jasmine. And we were like, no, her name is Gilda now, and we're not letting that. That's not going to happen. So Gilda was they thought Gilda was between 5 and 10 years old. That's because they couldn't tell all her teeth were rotted out. And the vet most vets generally that we saw in that year thought that she was closer to 8. And we had Gilda for 10 years. They thought that she was sort of towards the end, even when we got her. And we had 10 whole years of Gilda, which was not nearly enough. But nonetheless, we were very lucky to have had her for so long. So Audrey eclipses Gilda, and Audrey misses Gilda and is also happy to have us all to ourselves again because that's what she likes.
Did it take a while for those two to kind of gel?
Yeah, in fact, we were originally like, we should get someone to adopt Gilda because Audrey was very pouty about having to, she wasn't mean or anything, but Audrey's a sulker. She's a little passive aggressive, sulky dog sometimes. And then one day, like when we were still, didn't think we were going to keep Gilda, they were snuggled in a little dog bed and we were like, oh, well, this is better. And then we realized it was enough. So they never became, well, yeah, but the funny thing, once I was in New York for 3 weeks and I took Gilda with me, no, Rachel and I were both there and we had both dogs. And then when she came back a couple weeks before I did, and she brought Audrey. So I had Gilda by myself for a couple weeks. And then when I came back and I walked in the door, Audrey, who's not like a huge, Audrey likes to pretend that she's tough and doesn't have lots of emotion. And but when I came back in and I had Gilda, Audrey started like jumping up and down and squeaking at Gilda, like because she was was so scared that she was gone. And it was like the one time Audrey kind of like showed her true
showed her cards. How was she in the passing of Gilda?
It was the first month was hard for her. Like when we would come home, if we were out for 3 hours and we'd come back, she'd squeak and squeak, which is not a thing that she does. And it really was better after we, it must have been a week and a half after Gilda died. We buried Gilda at there's a great pet cemetery in Calabasas, which is actually, it's a nonprofit and it's run by Peter Falk's widow, who's actually a wonderful person. And I think all the Colombo dogs are buried there. All of their dogs are buried there. So we had like a viewing, like we had like a little, it was just Rachel and I and Audrey, but they have like a viewing of little Gilda in the coffin and we buried her. But when we had the little viewing, we put the coffin on the ground and Audrey got to see, and and I think that she then sort of understood. And it really was a little better after that she wasn't mystified as to what had happened. She's gotten used to being the only one again. Audrey likes other dogs, but she's not like a other dog. She's a people dog more than she's a dog.
Yeah. Well, I did see the photo of the headstone.
Yes.
And I was curious. I was going to ask because it did look like it was in the ground in a well manicured place. That it looked like a cemetery. So
yeah.
Good to know that it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was.
It's a wonderful place. It's a really that every dog that's there was really loved, and all the headstones say cute little things on them, and we like to think that the Gilda's there with it and has made friends with a horse and
Do you remember what's written on hers?
On Gilda's? Oh yeah, it says well, because we didn't know how old she was, it says 2000 question mark, because she was definitely born sometime in the aughts. So it was 200 question mark to 2023. Forever the teeniest puffin and the goodest girl.
Yeah, that's cute.
Very jealous that we're talking about a dog that's not her. Yes, you will.
Audrey, we'll get to you. And one other thing just about Gilda, was, this beautiful eulogy that you wrote, and you mentioned that she taught you more about love, perseverance, and courage than any human ever did. Now, does any human in your orbit take offense to that?
No, I think that everybody knew that. Listen, if I had some people in my orbit who had such an Oliver Twist upbringing, who then rose above, maybe they would take some umbrage. But I think all the people in my life know that they have not surmounted the odds that Gilda did.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say Audrey takes umbrage. Audrey is the one who says, "What about me?"
Well, it's funny. I ended up going to your wife's site as well. And, she's got a lot of dog posts. And there's one dog post that I feel like can launch a little bit of a conversation. And that was her with the baby Bjorn with, I don't know if it was Gilda or Audrey.
Yeah, that was Gilda. Yeah. Gilda didn't like going for walks too much, so Rachel tried to get a baby born to see if she would like it more, but we only used it a couple times.
But the post said, "Are we those people?"
Mhm.
And the answer was, "Yep." So I
Of
think I
course.
found a couple other instances of "Are you those people?" Going back to Gilda's eulogy, you mentioned baby birding Ritz crackers.
Oh, so yeah, because she only had one tooth.
Right.
And Gilda's last few years were hard. But she was happy until the last 2 months, I would say. But it became harder for Gilda to eat, and she got really picky about food. And the vet just said, at this point, she was probably 18 or 19 years old, and the vet just said, whatever she'll eat, she can eat. That nothing is bad,
Yeah.
and sometimes Gilda wouldn't eat, so she couldn't chew really, and if she wasn't eating the soft dog food, if she didn't want it, she had to eat something. Sometimes I would chew up some Ritz crackers. I did this more than I would like to admit. I would put Ritz crackers and a piece of chicken. I would try to make a square meal for her, and I would chew it up, and then I would give it to her. And it was really sweet. It was gross to anyone else, but to us, it was this very sweet.
It's a very bonding
Yeah.
moment.
Yes. And Audrey, if I ever have to do that for you one day, I will.
Okay. Another way, are you those people? Were the dogs part of your wedding? I know they're part of wedding pictures, but were they
They were
in the
actually
ceremony?
at our wedding. At our wedding, we were unfortunately it was at the Natural History Museum it was the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. And unfortunately, we were not allowed to have dogs at it, and we are very sad about it. We wish we had. So they were in all our photos that we took before, but then we did not have them at the ceremony.
Okay. This is a common occurrence, but again, in the context of your wife, she says, when your husband is on tour and only wants to FaceTime with the dogs. That's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
regular occurrence?
yeah, sure. Well, there's definitely but even before, like we were late to adopt FaceTime. There's something about being in your 40s that you're like, it isn't. I feel like people who are 22, they just
Yeah,
they
yeah.
FaceTime people. They don't call them, right? We call, and then everyone, like, do you want to FaceTime? But we always had to like, oh, I shouldn't tell anybody this, but put Audrey on the phone. And Rachel will be like, yeah, hang on a second. And it's like, hello? and um and we do a whole thing. But yes, I will FaceTime with Audrey, and the camera will flip around, and I will talk to her. And Rachel.
I've got a later question that can get into specifics of the voices you use. So that's
Okay.
part of another section. So I'll save that.
Great.
There was a post with Audrey with headphones. Do you take Audrey to work with you?
Yes. So I do a lot of work as a musical director when I'm not on the road for a number of different artists. So that has me. I'm not playing usually. I'm sitting at a table, with sort of leading a band and working on arrangements, and I'm at a computer, and I try to bring Audrey as much as possible. There's usually no resistance to it. I always ask first if it's okay if I bring my small friendly dog, and everyone's usually very open to it. And yeah, I just plop her in a dog bed next to the table, and I got those little earmuffs for her, but she usually shakes them off. The good thing is that now most rehearsals that you do for that aren't like rock band rehearsals, there's not the PA is not going, there's not usually real amps. So basically, there's a drum set that isn't being bashed into oblivion,
Mhm.
and everything else is all direct sounds. The guitars are going through Kempers or fractals or helixes or any other sort of amp sim. Bass is direct, keyboards are keyboards. So it's not too loud in the rehearsal room for her usually. So that's always fine, and she doesn't get rattled by the drums or anything. And I find that whenever I bring her into those rehearsals, she's always the mood always stays light, and everybody's always cheery when it's just a nice thing to have when you take when you take a break every hour and a half. Everybody can pet a dog. And I was once in a rehearsal with someone that I was music directing, and I shouldn't say the person's name, but it was just having like not the easiest. It was a difficult rehearsal day, and the artist was having a fairly just a little bit fragile, and Audrey kind of plopped right up next to them and spent the whole day in front of their piano, just kind of looking up at them, and it really kind of smoothed out the whole day. So I think she can be my secret weapon sometimes.
That's great. It's great to hear. I often ask this similar question about bringing a dog into rehearsals or their studios, and it's always followed up with, do they bring the best out of people? And it sounds like that's the answer.
Yeah. I mean, she'll do a thing too, which was the whole band is there. She'll stop at everyone's little station and say hello. She thinks that everybody's there for her, but she goes around and she's like, "Oh, you haven't had your turn with me yet." Yeah, she thinks she's a celebrity and that everybody, you know, and she's right. She brings out the best in. She certainly brings out the best in me too. That's the other thing is that I think that if I am directing a rehearsal and I have her there, I think that I'm probably at least 30% less of a jerk. So I would say that's the main thing. She brings out the best in me.
That's great. Great to hear. Now, it seems like tattoos are prerequisite for what you do and your occupation. Are any of them, are there any dogs or memorials to Gilda or anything?
Don't, and I'm going to get one. Rachel has a little thing that says Gilda with a little heart right there, and I have yet to get it, and I'm going to. So that's next for me. But no, I do not have any dog memorial tattoos or Audrey's name while she's alive. But all of these things are coming.
Okay. And how is Audrey doing? I know when you and I first connected, she had a little scare with her kidneys,
Yeah,
but by all accounts, it looks like she's back to
yeah.
100%.
This was incredibly. We've had Audrey has scared us 1,000 times, and so since Audrey was about six, probably for about the last 6 years, she's had an enlarged heart. She has what's called mitral valve disease. So that was sort of the first thing, which is the early part of congestive. It becomes congestive heart failure. And Gilda had it too. And so she's been on a ton of medication. But the thing about that, so there's a couple things. One is that I'll do the most recent thing first that happened, which is that medication, it's a diuretic because you got to keep as this has been explained to me, that by keeping them a little bit dehydrated, it keeps the heart from swelling as much. But it's not great so the medicine for the heart is not great. What's good for the heart is bad for the kidneys.
Right, right.
And she also has had she'll have flare-ups of pancreatitis since she was little. So we don't quite know what happened, but Audrey sort of stopped. She started getting picky about food, and then she kind of stopped eating, and we brought her in. This was what, 3 or 4 months ago. They said, oh, her kidney values, there's these two values, are through the roof, and we got to keep her overnight, until these numbers go down. And this was at the one thing too. This was at the animal hospital. The worst rehearsal space in Los Angeles for many years was a place called Cascade Studios on Santa Monica Boulevard. It was awful. It was the place where you would do your hour, like where there are places where you pay by the hour to have band practice with crappy backline gear. And just, I cut my teeth in places like this, and they're dear to my heart. But most of them are in the Valley. And then there was one in Hollywood that was worse than all the ones in the Valley. And this was called Cascade. And Cascade eventually closed down, and I've been to Cascade many, many times, and now it's the animal hospital.
Oh,
So, and I mean, again, like I really have it. Before I was a sideman, I was a guy in punk and rock bands, and I've spent plenty of time in this place, and it's very strange. I mean, Gilda died at Cascade, and it's very that I know these hallways, and that it's, oh yeah, this used to be the small rehearsal room, and then this was the big one that had the crappy stage in it, and that now that they're the individual exam rooms.
right.
So anyway, so Audrey's at Cascade, and they say we got to keep her until these numbers, and they said, well, it's clearly is very bad, and since she's been on these heart medicines for 6 years, we think that her kidneys are just finally giving out. And we're going to do a test to see if it's an infection. We're going to put her on a bunch of fluids, and we're going to put her on antibiotics, because if it's an infection, it'll get better with antibiotics and the numbers will go down. And if it's not an infection, it's going to stay this way. And she probably has about a week, which was shocking to me.
Yes.
They were like, but we're not going to know the results for the test I think this was on a Friday. They're like, we're not going to know the results for the test until Monday, or Tuesday or something like that. So we just have to start the antibiotics now. And yeah, so if it's an infection, she gets better. And if it's not, she dies, is essentially what they said. And Audrey it took a little bit, but Audrey got better and we brought her home 2 days later. And, within a day and a half or two, she was eating and she had some GI problems for a couple of days, but within like 5 days, she was like totally good again. And then the results came back from the test and there had been no infection.
Oh my God. So,
Oh, nobody knows anything. And meanwhile, her pancreas numbers are still not great, but we just don't know. But this was one of many things. What Audrey, we were going to bring her to have this thing in a device implanted in her heart that was like a clinical trial in Colorado at Colorado State University, which apparently is the best vet school in the country. They thought she was a good candidate for it because they don't do open heart surgery on dogs, and they were like, well, this isn't, clearly it had been getting a lot worse. We take her to the cardiologist every 6 months, and they thought that if we did, we needed to do this, this minor surgery to have this device implanted that had only been done 10 times, and it was, expensive, but not hugely prohibitively. And they only could do it when I was on tour in South America. This was a few years ago. So Rachel brings Audrey to Fort Collins, Colorado, and I knew that there was a pre-op screening the night before, and I get a call. I'm in the venue in Columbia, and the service is bad. And Rachel is, and Rachel's like, "Hey, think, not so, and she that's happy, and I'm like, I can't really hear you, but are you telling me that I think you're telling me that they think she doesn't need it?" And I called her outside, and then apparently like the medic, I think we had brought her into that last examination on a particularly bad day, and then the medicine had sort of done its work. So Audrey didn't have to have surgery. She got a free trip to Colorado, and Audrey has been costing us thousands of dollars and scaring us half to death her whole life, and that's okay. She can always do that. We don't mind.
well, I'm glad to hear everything is looking good, and I mean, she looks fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. But it's, sorry, I'm about to go on tour for 4 months. We're going to be in Europe for almost 4 months. The first show is May 9th in Paris, and the last show is August 21st in London, and not on the Eras tour, and not going to be home. So this is going to be by far not going away from a 12-year-old dog for 3.5 months
Yeah.
has health problems is a scary thing, and it's going to be hard for me to leave, and because there's always some risk.
I assume your wife will join you at some point for one
Yeah,
of these locations.
yeah,
Who do you trust the dog with?
it depends. She will be in. My family is in New York, and Rachel can work. Her job is sometimes there's a New York office and an LA office. And so she's going to actually be out in New York for some of the summer with my stepdad, my stepdad is 91 actually, but he sort of scans 77. So he'll watch her while she visits, most likely because they'll be in New York together.
Okay.
So yeah, we have a few people. Elias Malin, Kesha's drummer, my best friend. He sometimes will house sit. He has watched Audrey and Gilda. Yeah, many great musicians have dog sat, especially drummers. Dave Elliott, great dog sitter. Big drum teacher. Yeah, Dave and Elias are like the two main dog sitters we have in the community. And let's see.
Drummers can hold down the
Yeah.
fort.
Yeah.
Well, I wind up the show with the Zoomies. That's 5 quick questions.
Sure.
Let's go there. First question is, do you kiss these girls on the mouth?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay, I figured.
Yeah.
Question 2 is, did either one of them have a theme song of their own? Like whether it's kind of their walk-up music to the plate or something you orchestrated for them?
Well, we wrote a song for Audrey and Gilda that is called, I mean, it just sort of materialized, but it's called "I Come from the Pumpkin Patch." I feel like I can't sing it here, but so yes, so that is one of them. What other songs does Audrey have? Oh, well, then there's lots of them. Like Audrey and I, okay, you get to see a nose kiss. Audrey and I will slow dance to Sleepwalk by Santo and Johnny.
Okay.
The instrumental, the lap steel, the lap steel song. So we'll do that. That's one of hers. Yeah, she's got a few. I'm
Okay.
gonna think of more. I'm gonna think of more because there's oh yeah, don't fucking tell me what to do by Robin. That's one of her big ones. That's her pro wrestler walk-up music.
Okay, question 3 is, I know they don't go on tour with you, but if they did, what would they want on their tour rider?
Oh, that's a good question. Audrey, what would you want on your rider? Let's see. She definitely would want, well, Gilda would have wanted mozzarella cheese. That was her favorite. When it got harder for Gilda to eat, we would get her shredded mozzarella and she would just slurp it up. Audrey she would like hot dog on hers, hot dog and salami, all and eggs. She loves eggs. She would just like a plate of leftover eggs would be on her tour rider.
All right. And question 4, I alluded to before, but do you, and this is 2 parts, do you have a dog voice? Like, do you speak in a certain voice to the dog? The second part of that is, do you give the dog their own voice?
Yes. Generally the same voice. So Rachel and I each have voices for the dog, and it's something like, hello? Hey. That's kind of her voice. And yeah, her voice is sort of a little more aloof. And then our voice, that's voice talking to her is more general baby talk, but her voice talking back is definitely it's sort of an indignant child a little bit. It's like
Did that differ from Gilda's at all? Did they have
yes,
distinct?
yes, they do have distinct voices because Gilda was not as astute as Audrey, let's just say. Gilda did not, she was a little more just what's happening. That was sort of Gilda's voice, was very Gilda was like a little animatronic robot. Um yeah. So
Okay. All right, and last but not least, I always ask if there's a dog organization or a dog service you'd like to give a shout out to, and that could be anything from a rescue to a vet to a walker to a sitter, anything you want.
sure. Well, the big one I would like to give a shout out to is the Los Angeles Pet Memorial Park, which I mentioned earlier in Calabasas, and the charity that they have that is funded is called Sophie, as it's like abbreviated SOPHIE.
Okay.
Yeah, they've just made a wonderful place where people's pets can rest forever there. I think that they have made the experience of losing a pet much more beautiful than it gets to be that now. And as sad as it is, we have a place to go, and
Yeah.
we see other people there having the same experience, and it's a wonderful place. So that's been really excellent. And then there's the Chin Rescue called JC Care, which is where Gilda came from.
Okay. Very good. I'm curious to look up that cemetery because, I mean, I'm on the East Coast, so I'm not familiar with that. But I assume, do people really go large? I mean, are there headstones or mausoleums or anything out of the?
There's some pretty big headstones there, and there's like a big mausoleum that that I think people just have. There's a bunch of sort of ashes are in there, but there isn't like a single mausoleum for one big pet. But I mean, there are horses there. There are I believe the MGM lion is there.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's something to hang your hat on.
yeah, like the dog who played Rin Tin Tin. But yeah, so there's some pretty big headstones, but
Yeah.
there aren't any. It doesn't have like the George Jones mausoleum or anything.
All right. Well, Max, you're completed your first dog interview, and thank you
Yes,
for doing
thank
it
you.
with me.
Thank you. Great, I appreciate it.
All right, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Audrey. Say thank you. Thank you. I'm doing it now.
Goodbye, Audrey. You're beautiful.